The title of the presentation is actually The Sporting Nation on Screen, Nationalism in Indian Sports Cinema. Before getting into this particular area, I would like to have a general idea regarding the history of cinema as well as how is it related to nationalism, the general concept of nationalism. For that, I would like to invite your attention to a very famous movie. It's a silent movie. Name of that movie is The Birth of a Nation, which was directed by D.W. Griffith. It came out in the year 1915. And that particular movie was has a very important position, or it's a milestone movie in the history of world cinema for its creative as well as aesthetic value, the way it was, the filmic aesthetics was conceived by D.W. Griffith and all. But at the same time, this film is again, it is notorious for, or it's notorious, or it's controversial for its misrepresentation of the Black African American community, that particular movie, and it created a big a set of big issues, a set of havoc in the US at that particular time. Let me proceed with the paper. It's like this. D.W. Griffith's movie, The Birth of a Nation, which was released in the year 1915, is generally considered as a major work in the history of world cinema for its technical superiority and artistic values. However, the same movie has a disreputation of representing the white superiority in the US. It also tries to project and glorify the ideas of Ku Klux Klan. It's actually, you're familiar with the community of Ku Klux Klan. It's a fringe group which claims the. Let me check, sir. Just a minute. I'm sorry for the interruption. Sir, actually, I sent it to David Jeyaraj at yahoo.co.in. I think so.
Okay, I'll check it again. Check both my emails and it's not available.
Okay.
I said David J.
I'll send it once again, sir. I'll send it once again.
Yeah, or you can send it to davidjraj@gmail.com.
Okay, sir. Okay. This I was trying to talk, I was speaking about the Ku Klux Klan. It's actually a French group that was promoting the white superiority and the Catholicism in the US. I'm sorry, there's a power failure from my side. Just a minute, I'll be back now. I'm sorry for the inconvenience again and again. Hope that I am visible, right? Hello?
Blais, you are audible and visible, no worry.
Fine. Sorry, sir. I mean, there was a power failure, unexpected power failure here.
Yeah. It happens everywhere.
We are having heavy rain from the morning onwards. That's the problem here. Okay, sir. Thank you for this PPT. And let me continue. Okay. This misrepresentation of the African American lives in this movie created a havoc, and several protests were made against the public exhibition of the movie. Still, above all, this particular movie received wide market success as well as critical acclaim all over the world, and is still considered as a milestone movie in the history of world cinema. This is what I want to give it as a what do you call an overview or a general introduction to this particular issue of nationalism in cinema. Film representations is much different from film aesthetics. Film aesthetics, of course, when you look at this particular film, it's a silent movie. And when you look at this particular movie from the aesthetic perspective, it is having all the superiority of aesthetic superiority, both technical as well as this aesthetic superiority is present in this movie. But unfortunately, while presenting the characters from the African American community, D.W. Griffith intentionally or non-intentionally has given what you call a sort of dark shades to their characters. More or less, they were considered as villains, or they were given semi-villainous characters and all. This is actually the way the film is actually misrepresenting, or how nationalism should be critically examined in films. And moving on, as the movie tried to project the American sense of white nationalism on screens, the African identities were constructed as other or alien. In other words, the grand narratives of or celebration of nationalism is possible only by construction of a potential other. This is what we usually consider in the case of grand narratives of nationalism. There should be a potential other. Whereas I would come to that particular point when in my lecture, during the course of my lecture, and for the beginning, I will be mentioning all these points now. In cinema, the narratives favoring nationalism are always in search of a potential other, which could be the neighboring nations or minority communities within the nation. There are mainly two possibilities. To construct a grand narratives of nation, this is not just the case of films alone. While we go for the political discourses or even sociological aspects, we usually go with, when a grand narrative of nationalism is constructed, we always keep a potential other. Since this is an academic session, I don't want to get into more controversial statements. So I'll be limiting it with this particular statements. Every now and then, just imagine with your own experiences with the current national situations and all. So you'll be able to identify with this. And what I'm trying to say is a grand narrative of nationalism, which is a celebrated or the grand fashion of grand nationalism, is actually constructed or manufactured by constructing a potential other, which could be another nation or a minority group within your own nation. That is the main point that I want to emphasize. Before attempting to define the concept of nationalism, I would like to suggest a few texts. Maybe can you move on to the next slide? These are some of the texts that I would like to suggest you to read regarding nationalism. Of course, most of you will be well aware of this particular text. Before attempting to define the concept of nationalism, I would suggest you to read the following works. Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities, Reflections on the Origin and Spread of Nationalism, and its counter-narrative is the text titled Whose Imagined Community? That was written by Partha Chatterjee. And Partha Chatterjee's article is from the book, I forgot the name of that particular book, I'm sorry. And as we do not have much time, I'm not going into the details of this particular area, but I'll be mentioning a few points from this particular text also. I'll be focusing more on the concept put forward by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon has introduced the concept of national culture, the concept of national culture in his book, The Rupture of the Earth. And this article is, this chapter, on national culture is actually a chapter in this particular text. In that particular text, he mentions national culture as it is not a folklore, nor an abstract populism that believes it can discover the people's true nature. A national culture is the whole body of efforts made by a people in the sphere of thought to describe, justify, and praise the action through which that people has created itself and keeps itself in existence. The way a group of people defines itself, its existence, this is what we call nationalism. It is not just a populist thought which is propagated by any particular group. It is the way a group of people define themselves. That is what Frantz Fanon tries to call as national culture. Similarly, while examining the political and social changes in Europe, Benedict Anderson points out the emergence of print capitalism in relation to the emergence of nationalistic spirits. After the development of printing industry, one dialect attains hegemonical position over others, and this is considered to be a major reason for the development of nationalism in Europe. I don't think that statement needs an explanation. According to Benedict Anderson's that particular book, Imagine Communities, he focuses on the emergence of print capitalism. After the emergence of print capitalism, a particular dialect received more superiority over other dialect. That dialect which was preferred by the publishers, that dialect received more superiority over the others, and that triggered the emergence of nationalism as a spirit in European context. This is the idea that was put forward by Benedict Anderson. But this idea of Eurocentric nationalistic spirit was questioned by Partha Chatterjee in this particular book, whose Imagined Community. But Partha Chatterjee contests the arguments of Anderson by pointing out that the socio-political situations in colonized countries were different from the European context. He understands that the anti-colonial movements have a significant position in framing nationalism in colonized countries, especially in Indian context. This is much different. We cannot actually apply the European way of nationalistic movement into the context of colonized nations. In colonized nations, the anti-colonial movement that was widely accepted in India was the Partha Chatterjee. Critics like Partha Chatterjee says that the anti-colonial movements are the reasons for the widespread acceptance or the widespread of nationalistic spirit in India, in colonized countries like India. Now, I'm coming back to the context of cinema again. The grand idea of nationalism is essentially linked to the Hindi language-based Bollywood industry. India being a land of multiple ethnicities and linguistic groups, the claim of Hindi-based nationalistic spirit has to be problematized. We often have a tendency of equating Indian cinema with Hindi cinema as just Indian cinema. We have n number of language cinemas in India. We have several language cinemas like Tamil, Malayalam, Bengali, Assamese, where we could find good number of cinema, both artistic as well as commercially successful cinema. But unfortunately, in the global markets, for a long period of time, until recently, there was a controversy where the South Indian cinema started questioning the power of the North Indian cinema. After the release of some movies like KGF 2 and RRR, then Vikram and all, there was a controversy in the film circle that South Indian cinema started questioning the power of the North Indian cinema or the Bollywood cinema itself. And keeping all these things apart, there is for a long period of time, Hindi cinema was equated as Indian cinema in global spaces. This attempt intentionally discards other major film industries in India like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam or Bengali, both in terms of market as well as cultural output. However, as mentioned before, the idea of nationalism is considered to be a sole privilege of the Bollywood industry. Though Hindi is not given the status of national language in the country, it occupies a hegemonical position over other languages. Thus, Hindi cinema and its culture locale enjoy the privileged status of being projected as the face of Indian cinema, and it usually projects themes related to Indian nationalism. Now I'm going to examine the core features of the Bollywood industry with regard to the nationalistic issues. The Indian freedom struggle, the sacrificial life of Indian military people, anti-terrorist activities, etc., have been the repeating themes in Hindi films from the very early period. This tendency of adhering to the themes continue even now. For example, the movie Shahid, not the recent movie. There was a movie named Shahid which was released recently. I am talking about the movie Shahid that came out in the year 1948. It's one among the early Hindi movies that dealt with the theme of Indian freedom struggle. Just 1 year after the India attaining Indian freedom. This movie was released in 1948. Similarly, Mother India, that is actually a cult movie in the history of India. I think most of you are familiar with most of you, those who are interested in film studies, will be familiar with this particular title also. Similarly, Mother India, which came out in the year 1957, is a landmark movie in the history of Indian cinema. Is another and it is also a typical example for the portrayal of nationalism clubbed with fantasies of ideal motherhood. As the title of the film mentions, it's Mother India. Talking about mothering or the feminine attributes of motherhood, all those things are actually attributed. And this cinema is actually, in a way, nurturing these ideas of motherhood also. The movie, which was directed by Mahbub Khan, portrayed Nargis. Nargis, you are familiar with that actress. Most of you might be familiar with that actress, Nargis Dutt. And the character played by Nargis Dutt in Mother India was Radha. Okay, Nargis as an epitome of sacrifice, perseverance, and tolerance. It is based on this filmic representation, the so-called mythification of India as a feminine entity with glorified values was formed. What I'm trying to focus is, even before that, there was we call India as a mother country, all those things, but the feminine attributes with or the motherhood values associated with the country was more popularized or more triggered after the release and the grand success of the movie Mother India. In this particular movie, Nargis is portrayed as a mother who was ready to kill her son for the sake of nation, and was later. This movie is actually this movie is trying to canonize the populist nationalist sensibility also. Similarly, the war between India and China in 1962, the India-Pak wars in 1965, 1971, 1999, etc., were influencing in constructing nationalistic war movies. There were a set of movies like that. There was a famous movie called Prahar, then Border. There are a set of such movies which came out in the Bollywood industry, which were related to war, which were related to India's war with other nations. That came out especially in Bollywood industry. What I am trying to say was, at that particular period of time, the history of India, only Bollywood movies were focusing on such areas of national interest. Whereas now there are other language industries are also focusing on such areas. Like I would like to mention the movies of Major Ravi, which was a few movies of Major Ravi. Major Ravi is a director in Malayalam film industry who directed movies like Kurukshetra, then Kirti Chakra, Beyond Borders. All these are actually India's encounters with other nations. All these are war movies. Mostly these all are war movies, and it's dealing with the encounters of India with the enemy countries, so-called enemy countries. Okay, but all these movies came out only by the first and second decades of the 21st century. That's what I was trying to focus. But these movies, mostly the Prahar or Border, all these movies came around the 1970s or 80s. And at that time, it was considered to be the privilege of the Hindi language belt or Hindi language Bollywood industry to portray such nationalistic films with nationalistic interest. Now let me move on to the next portion of this paper. That is, by the end of 1990s and the early years of 2000, the Khan trio, I'm mentioning about the Khan trio in Bollywood industry, namely the Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan and Salman Khan, emerged as powerful superstars in Bollywood industry. Shah Rukh Khan's Dil Se, Main Hoon Na, Veer Sara, all try to project nationalistic spirits slowly, this tendency actually moved on to his grand success movie named Chak De India, which came out in the year 2007. Okay, all these movies are commercially success too. In Chak De India, the Islamic identity of Shah Rukh Khan, starring Kabir Khan, was suspiciously looked upon when India faced a defeat to Pakistan in the World Cup hockey final match. His Islamic identity is questioned and is alienated in his own nation. This is what the movies try to problematize. Though he is an Indian, he belongs to the citizenship of India. When India faced a defeat in the hockey match against Pakistan in World Cup final, it was not just it was not just an issue of sports. It became an issue of national interest, and the identity or the religious or community identity of that particular character was problematized. And that is the core of that particular film. Instead, it is given an additional color of religion and community as the protagonist belongs to Islamic identity. In other words, the character Kabir Khan is portrayed as a problematized Indian Muslim entity in the grand narrative of Indian nationalism. Similarly, in Amir Khan starring Lagan, again, that particular movie is also about cricket. Cricket is shown as the symbol of resistance against British colonialism. Also, Amir Khan plays the role of Mangal Pandey. It's a biopic. Mangal Pandey is a biopic in which Amir Khan played the role of that hero. Again, an angry young man hero in Reng De Basanti. And these all are actually his encounters or his his contribution or his way of dealing with the nationalistic issues in cinema. Similarly, his characters in PK and Dangal spoke against the communalism and corruption in sports respectively. In PK as well as in Dangal, I'm familiar. I'm sure that most of you might have seen all these movies. So I don't have to go into the details of the plot narratives and all these things. When we concentrate on the movies of Salman Khan, it is clearly visible that he follows a central or neutral position when the themes are related to nationalism. Salman Khan mainly adheres to the public and popular common sense which favors the Hindutva version of Indian nationalism, whereas actors like Shah Rukh and Amir try to contest the general sensibility that is in currency in the society. What I was trying to focus is, when you examine the movies of Salman Khan, he is actually not in a way questioning the existence or questioning the general popular narratives of nationalism in India. Whereas when you closely observe the movies of Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan, it is in a way disturbing the grand narrative of nationalism, which is actually propagated by the state. For example, while examining the movie Bajrangi Bhaijaan, in which Salman Khan was the hero, the character portrayed by Salman undertakes so much of pain to bring Munni is the name of a character in that particular movie, back to her home in Pakistan. By convincingly masquerading the political undercurrents that exist between two nations, the movie tries to project a Hindu Hanuman devotee to protect an insecure Pakistani child in India. Similarly, the movie Bharat, Bharat is another movie, in which Salman Khan was the hero, which deals with the premises of India-Pak separation. Again, another movie is there, Tuberate, which deals with Indo-China War, etc., are typical examples for the movies which projects characters with Hindutva sentiments. The identity issues faced by Islamic minority community in India is seldom addressed in the movies of Salman. Now I'm moving on to the movies of another hero in Bollywood industry. The rise of Akshay Kumar to the status of a poster boy proclaiming the political ideologies of the Hindutva groups on screen has attained wide publicity and acceptance among Indian audience. The contemporary political scenario in Bollywood industry marks a shift from the Khan trio. Movies like Parmanu, in which John Abraham was the hero, Uri, the surgical strike, and Sardar Uddam, both the movies, Vicky Kaushal is the hero, etc., are political ideologues of the government in power. Akshay Kumar ensured the political position in cinema by projecting nationalist issues through the movies like Holiday, Gabbar is Back, etc. I think some of you might have seen the movie Holiday and Gabbar is Back. If not, you could easily relate Holiday with a particular Tamil movie enacted by Vijay, actor Vijay. Name is Tupaki. Tupaki is actually a remake of the movie Holiday. This trend of celebrating vigorous versions of nationalism is visible in movies like Airlift, Gold, Kesari, etc., which are all enacted by, or the hero is played, the role of hero is played by Akshay Kumar in all these movies, Airlift, Gold, and Kesari. The movies like Pac-Man, Toilet, Ek Prem Kada are the cinematic adaptations of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan project promoted by the Central Ministry. Akshay Kumar best utilizes his cinematic spaces to promote the political dialogues of Hindutva forces in the nation. Apart from the grand narratives of nationalism from the Bollywood industry, other major film industries like the Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam industries have dealt with issues of freedom struggle and all these things, etc. But for example, in popular Tamil movies enacted by Shivaji Ganeshan, like Veerapandya Kattabomman, Kapalotte Tamilan, in which there were characters who tried to resist the British imperialism. But the problem is that the mainstream. The problem is that they were just considered as regional encounters. They were just treated as regional encounters, and they were not given any sort of national importance when we analyze the history of Indian cinema. Of course, the performance of Shivaji Ganeshan is well noticed in the movie Veerapandya Kattabomman and Kapalotte Tamilan, etc. But however, when we consider it with the general narrative or the general tendency of nationalistic movies in par with the Indian cinema, these Tamil encounters, or there are, I could point out a few such movies from Malayalam also. Movies like Pazhashiraja, Kerala Varma Pazhashiraja is another movie that was enacted by Mammootty, and the recent movie Marakkar, Arabikadalinte Simham, Urumi. There were several such movies from Malayalam also. All these movies came out recently also. But these movies are not even given the status of a national response to the British imperialism or the other invaders, like the Portuguese invaders. They were all considered as regional encounters with the British imperialism. Whereas movies like Manikarnika or Mangal Pandey are actually considered as national resistance against the British imperialism. This is the focus area where I would like to focus. There is actually an involvement of power relation that we could find in creating such discourses. Okay, now let me move on. The overemphasis or excessive importance given to nationalistic film themes from Hindi-speaking belt tries to marginalize other voices from non-Hindi speaking states as just regional outbreaks. In other words, the diverse narratives of nationalism in India is restricted to the singularized Hindutva version of it. While examining the social psyche of Indian society, Sudhir Kakar and Katrina Kakar, they are well-known sociologists in India, social psychologists, maybe I could call them as social psychologists, puts it as Indianness. They define Indianness as follows. Indianness then is about similarities produced by an overarching Indic, preeminently Hindu civilization that has contributed the lion's share to what we call the cultural gene pool of India's people. In other words, Hindu cultural patterns have played a major role in the construction of Indianness. This particular quote is from the book The Indians, Portrait of a People. Okay. In short, what is generally described as Indianness is essentially an outfit of Hindutva hegemony. Now, focusing more on to the sports movies and sport biopics, the adrenaline rush. I mean, it's actually a funny remark or a casual remark made by myself. When you watch such movies, there would be normally an adrenaline rush it's generated. Adrenaline rush felt by the audience is usually triggered by the spirit of nationalism. It is based on an imaginary or illusionary concept of nationalism that is the basic plot structure of these sports movies. Bollywood movies like Chak De India, Gold, Sultan, etc. tried to utilize the backdrop of sports to build its narrative. But amazingly, Bollywood has the biggest number of sports biopics in India. That is what we have to focus more. Again, that is again another area to be discussed. Why Bollywood is actually coming up with more number of sports biopics. Not only sports biopics, they are also always coming up with several number of biopics, several biopics. In that, especially they focus more on sports personalities. Why is it so? What could be the reasons for the Hindi language speaking films to target on the lives of the celebrated and unsung sports person in India? Why are other language films lagging behind in this particular area? This is what we have to focus more. I'm giving out a set of questions, and I don't know. I mean, I'm actually in search of some answers for that. Movies like Pansing Tomar. I'm listing out a set of sports biopics which were produced from the Bollywood. Movies like Pansing Tomar, Bhag Milka Bhag, Mary Kom, Dangal, Budhya Singh Born to Run, MS Dhoni, The Untold Story, Asar, Sachin, A Billion Dreams, Surma, Saina, Rashmi Rocket, 83, which a movie that came out recently, which dealt with the India's success in the 1983 World Cup, are a few examples of such biographical movies produced on Indian sports people. The formulaic narratives of all these movies include the perseverance, determination, unexpected hazards in their journey, etc. Finally, they overcome all this and brings glory to the nation. This is the usual formulaic narrative patterns which is followed by all these movies, Though the same formula gets repeated, the movies attain commercial success. Issues like unfavorable financial and familial situation, the denial of opportunities in Indian sports area, gender inequality, corruption, the physical and sexual harassment faced by women sports persons, etc., have been the hot topics of discussion in many of these movies. Also, India's achievements in the fields of cricket, hockey, wrestling, boxing, etc., are yet another reason to promote such backgrounds in silver screen. Though most of the incidents are familiar to the audience, the suspense, which is a part of such movies, keeps them engaging till the movie comes to an end. Apart from these primary factors, of course, every movie, the success of every movie will have some primary elements to be discussed. And I personally felt that these are primary elements which is actually the success element of sports biopics or sports movies in general, which are produced from the Bollywood industry. Apart from these primary factors, on a deeper analysis of the politics of narratives of these particular movies, it is evident that the success of these sports movies are the byproduct of the unconsciously assimilated affinity to the nationalistic spirit. The audience there is an unconscious assimilation or affinity towards the nationalistic spirit. We are actually taught from the very beginning of our schooling that India is our country, all Indians are brothers and sisters, and these all are, recited daily, and such nationalistic culture is actually propagated through our schooling system. And for being a nation, I think it's essential too. But now, these movies could convert the potential energy of nationalism to kinetic energy and is well exploited for commercial success of the films. Why I am using the terms which are associated with physics? You are well aware that kinetic energy is that what you call, easily we could call it as energy which is present in a particular form. Potential energy is that energy which is innate in a particular object. And whereas when it is given a force, it becomes kinetic energy. So the nationalistic spirit is actually in a dormant state or is innate in every Indian citizen, and it is given a force by these particular movies, and it is converted to a sort of kinetic energy. I was trying to make it in a literal sense, that's what. But the idea of publicness or commonness, which is associated with this nationalism, the concept of nationalism, the publicness, which is applicable to the entire India, which is applicable to the entire communities in India. Of course, we should admit the fact that India is not a single entity. India is a land of multiple culture and multiple diversities, multiple religions, castes, etc. But when we apply a common rule to all these multitudes, it's going to create some issues. So what I'm trying to say is the publicness or commonness is essentially limited to the dominant ideology of Hindutva propagandist forces, and these are proliferated by the popular Hindi cinema also. The idea of a single or the a limited or a dominant ideology of a singular nation is actually propagated by the popular Hindi cinema. For example, consider the movie Bhag Milka Bhag. I'm inviting your attention to that particular movie. Farhan Akhtar was the hero of that particular movie also. Milka Singh lost his parents. It's a movie about the very famous Indian athlete Milka Singh. Bhag Milka Bhag. Okay, Milka Singh lost his parents in a riot during the India-Pak separation. Okay. Though the movie sticks on to the factual events in the life of the hero, the excessive usage of the music and emotional ingredients could manufacture an imaginary space where the opponent athlete, who is a Pakistani, is considered not just an opponent of Milka, but an opponent of India. So when Milka attains a success on the track, it is not just the success of a traditional hero on the screen, but also the success of India as a nation. This is the politics that we have to examine in sports biopics. Why is such a narrative being repeatedly portrayed in sports biopics, or especially not biopics, sports movies itself? There is always a countering person. There is always, of course, sports is something related with victory and all. But why every time there is a countering action, which is considered, which is generally considered as a potential threat to the Indian nation? Why is again repeatedly a particular nation being portrayed in these movies? This is what we have to problematize while examining such sports movies. This element could be seen even in daily life also. While we could easily understand this while watching an India-Pakistan cricket match. The intensity that the people of India show when India is facing a cricket match with Pakistan. This is easily understandable at that particular point. I would invite your attention to that area also. Now let me put forward two questions. Where are other nationalities within India? I mean, I'm not using purposefully. I have avoided the word regionalism, and I will try to put forward the several nationalities. Where are other nationalities within India? Why are sports movies from Tamil not proclaiming the general national spirit by contesting the Hindi Hindutva spirits? Again, I'm coming out of the Bollywood industry, and I'm now focusing more on the Tamil industry. Okay. For example, some recent movies like Bigil and Kana. Take, for example, the movies like Bigil and Kana. Bigil is Vijay Starar movie, and the other one is Aishwarya Rajesh Starar and movie in which cricket and football is the sports item that is dealt in that particular movies. Both the movies are trying to portray the issues of Tamil regional spirits clubbed with other usual elements like gender inequality, the debt-ridden agricultural sector in Tamil Nadu. This is the problem. When movies like sports movies come out from Tamil Nadu, instead of questioning the Hindutva hegemonical discourses propagated from the Bollywood industry, Tamil cinema usually resorts to the elements of traditional marketing or the traditional formulaic elements like the sentiments associated with family, sentiments associated with agricultural sector in Tamil Nadu, all these areas. Whereas the focus gets shifted. This lack of focus is in establishing national issues could be the one reason for non-Hindi speaking movie industries not to come up with such grand narratives from like the Bollywood. We don't have much such grand nationalistic movie narratives. Of course, we could make such movies. There are a good number of sports persons from every state in India. For example, I was thinking of a sports person who from Tamil Nadu who participated in the Paralympic and meet and received the gold medal. I think his name is I forgot his name. I'm sorry. But still, there are some inspiring sports people from every state in India. But why are we not producing movies based on their such characters? Whereas the Hindi movies mostly try to focus on such people. When such movies are produced from Hindi sector, why is it getting much acclaim? And why sports movies produced from non-Hindi speaking languages mostly focus on other areas? When when movies like Bigil and Kana came to hit the screens, they were mostly dealing with the issues of okay, I'll focus more on the movie Kana. There was the issues of gender inequality, of course, that is a major issue. Okay, it's Mariappan. Thank you. Someone has mentioned the name. Thank you, friend. Okay, Mariappan. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. Okay, but unfortunately, from other states, we fail to project sports people, or we fail to project a nationalistic spirit or claiming such movies from these areas, where we mostly focus on other areas, especially when it comes to movies like Kana. There is a what you call a formula which is a purposeful attempt to capture the interest of both the youth as well as the family audience. At one time, there is the problems faced by a normal girl from a rural area in Tamil Nadu to get into the national women's sports cricket team. At the same time, her father is facing severe pressure from the bank to repay his agricultural loan. Again, this is the problem: the lack of focus on national issues. And of course, there are only less number of movies produced from this particular area, non-Hindi movies. The movies produced are not focusing more on this particular area also. This is the limitation that I would like to point out. A typical exemption, of course, apart from all these things, a typical exemption that I could notice from the Tamil industry was a movie Jiva that was, I think, was directed by Sushindran in 2014, which dealt with the casteism and internal politics that deny opportunities for sports people. That was also related to cricket, and I think some of you might have watched that movie. Vishnu Vishal was the hero of that movie, and it dealt with the issues of casteism though not in a very politicized way. It dealt with casteism in a subtle manner. That is one such exemption that I could focus, I could find from the Tamil industry. Now I think it's time to conclude. Let me conclude now. The nationalism that is represented on silver screen is essentially a product of capitalism. In India, all the populistic and popular narratives are in a way byproduct of capitalism. It caters the interest of the capitalist or the market. That's what I would like to focus. It is the exchange value of the imaginative concept of nationalism that decides the success of sports movies. When the non-Hindi speaking industries are incapable of producing grand sports narratives, the Hindi film industry successfully produces a good number of such films. This is because of the hegemonic position and privilege enjoyed by the Hindi Hindutva ideology. The political movement to discard the diversity of Indian culture and to limit it to a single national entity could be mobilized by the nationalistic sports narrative. What I was trying to say is that any propaganda or any political ideology is inscribed to a particular community through various measures. Several ideological apparatus could be utilized, and cinema is also an ideological apparatus. While discussing the politics of Bollywood sports movies, it is evident that a hegemonic or the powerful ideology is repeatedly transmitted through these particular movies, claiming that Hindi movie or the Hindi nationalism is gaining more superiority over other identities in India, whereby discarding the nationalities. Where we usually use the term Hindi and regional languages. It's beyond that. We are not in a way using regional languages. We should start using non-Hindi languages, Hindi or non-Hindi languages or something like that. Regional languages is yet another word to regionalize, or it's a way of marginalizing the white culture of other communities in India. Whereas, let me come back to the cinema itself. Cinema is also utilizing. Cinema is also, could also be utilized as an ideological state apparatus, or by the dominant or the hegemonic position in the country to manipulate or to modify or construct the grand narrative of nationalism. And this is all what I have to say. And thank you all for patient listening. And I would be happy for if there are questions raised on this particular issue and feedback if given. Thank you.